The film opens in France, showing a man named Frank who works as a quality control inspector on a skyscraper construction project. The next day, he accompanies his wife, Leo, to the hospital for a routine pregnancy checkup. At that time, Leo's pregnancy had reached 8 months, and they were simply waiting for the day their baby would be born. After the examination, the couple returned to their apartment, but as soon as they entered, they were shocked to find their home in complete disarray, as if someone had just ransacked the place searching for something.
C'est la deuxième fois en 15 jours, et la dernière fois ils ont pris ton ordi. Ils cherchent quoi?
J'en sais rien.
T'en sais rien. Retourne au commissariat.
Sometime later, Frank meets his old friend, Ben. From their conversation, it is revealed that the people who attacked Frank's home were actually looking for a mysterious key that he had hidden.
Ils ont trouvé la clé?
J'ai pas pu aller voir, mais je crois pas.
Et Léo toujours pas au courant?
À 15 jours de la naissance, là, je me vois pas lui raconter tout ça.
A few days after the incident, while Frank is working at one of the high-rise buildings with his colleague, he nearly slips and falls from a great height. At that same moment, he notices a suspicious figure running hurriedly down the emergency stairs. Frank immediately chases after him, but the bald man manages to escape. Feeling uneasy, Frank rushes home because he hasn't heard from Leo since morning.
Léo!
Ça va?
Upon arriving, he feels relieved to see that his wife is safe. Elsewhere, a white-haired man enters a car that has been waiting for him. Inside the car sits the same bald man Frank had been chasing earlier. However, moments later, night falls. While Leo is asleep, Frank quietly climbs to the rooftop of their apartment to check the spot where he had hidden the key. It is unclear what the key's purpose is, but it is undoubtedly important, and Frank is determined to protect it from falling into anyone's hands. He even decides to move its hiding place into the kitchen sink. Before he can finish, Leo suddenly appears and questions her husband. She has grown suspicious because lately Frank has been restless and often spends nights on the rooftop instead of sleeping beside her. As Leo keeps pressing him for honesty, a sudden loud knock is heard at the door. In an instant, the atmosphere turns tense as a group of masked men break in and attack them. A fierce fight ensues. From the way they fight, it becomes clear that Frank and Leo are not an ordinary couple. Despite their efforts to resist, the overwhelming number of attackers leaves them cornered. Frank is eventually captured and tied up, while one of the assailants forces his fingerprint onto something to unlock it. Moments later, the same white-haired man who killed his own subordinate appears. He is the mastermind behind the attack, a ruthless mercenary named Van Naken. He has been hired to obtain the key Frank is hiding. When Frank refuses to hand it over, Van Naken hacks into his phone and beats him unconscious. He then orders his men to drug Leo and take her away. The story then shifts to 10 years earlier. At that time, a group of young officers had just graduated from an elite police academy called Guigan. They celebrated their graduation together with their families and senior officers. Among them were Frank and Leo, who at that time had no relationship whatsoever. Frank was known as the top graduate of his class. There, he also met Nico, one of his fellow graduates, who came with his wife Manon.
On en a chié, mais on l'a fait.
Faut que je te présente quelqu'un. Attends.
Bonjour.
Franck.
Shortly after, their superior, Astro, approached Frank and handed him a badge engraved with the words Ad Vitam on the back, the same badge once owned by Frank's late father when he was in service. 2 years passed. During the recruitment period for new soldiers in the elite Gigan unit, Ben participated in the rigorous tests to become a member. In the final test, he was instructed to shoot at a target placed on a senior officer's chest. With incredible precision, Ben hit the bullseye and was named the top graduate of that year. During his graduation ceremony, Leo attended to show her support. She knew that Ben's status as an immigrant made it difficult for him to fit in with others. Seeing Ben start to open up and socialize, Frank, who had secretly developed feelings for Leo, took the opportunity to get closer to her. He gathered the courage to confess his feelings, and to his surprise, Leo had long felt the same way about him. The atmosphere turned romantic, and they almost kissed in the bathroom. But the moment was abruptly ruined when a heavily drunk Ben suddenly stumbled in and nearly vomited there. That night, when Frank went home with Nico and Manon, Nico teased him by asking whether he and Leo would spend the night together. From that day on, Frank and Leo officially became a couple, and Ben, Nico, and Manon warmly welcomed their relationship. A week later, after completing a training session, Frank received a call from Eric, a hotel staff member at the Trenton Hotel. Eric said he had heard gunshots from one of the rooms. Based on that report, Frank immediately rushed to the scene with Nico and Ben.
Eric,
Ouais, Franck.
Il y a eu des tirs dans une chambre au dernier étage.
vous avez prévenu la police?
Je sais pas.
Ça vient de se passer, je t'ai appelé direct.
Bah écoute, je vais passer un coup de fil là pour voir si on peut intervenir, mais bah, tu sais quoi, de toute façon, on n'est pas loin, on va passer, d'accord? Et personne ne monte, hein?
Ok.
On arrive.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
C'est un pote qui bosse au Trianon, il y a eu des coups de feu dans une chambre.
C'est parti.
Ça va?
Ça va?
Il est là, ton directeur?
Il est à la réception.
While they were gathering information from the management, 2 suspects suddenly attacked and opened fire on them. Both Ben and Nico were shot.
Messieurs, s'il vous plaît.
After managing to subdue the assailants, Frank quickly rushed to Nico, who was severely injured. Unfortunately, Nico could not be saved and died on the spot. The next day, Frank received a harsh reprimand from his superior, Astro, for acting recklessly without waiting for official orders. Because of his actions, 2 officers were shot, and one of them died. With a heavy heart, Astro asked Frank to resign from the unit.
Tu as trahi ma confiance. Et je dois te demander de quitter le groupe.
Before leaving, Frank took one last look at the photo of his late father hanging on the office wall, then walked toward the locker room to pack his belongings. The next day, after Nico's funeral, Frank sees Leo having a serious conversation with their superior, Astro. Having witnessed Nico's tragic death, Leo decides to resign from the Gigan unit. Sometime later, Frank visits Ben, who is still recovering from his gunshot wounds. While there, they come across a social media post claiming that the shooters at the Trenton Hotel were former members of the Special Forces. However, the news is quickly dismissed as unreliable due to the lack of supporting evidence. Upon hearing this, Ben advises Frank not to get involved in the matter. Medical reports also reveal that Ben's injuries are severe enough that he can no longer perform duties requiring intense physical capability. Initially, the police intended to transfer him to an administrative position, but Ben ultimately chose to resign. This truth deepens Frank's sense of guilt.
Si jamais je pensais qu'on faisait une connerie avant d'entrer dans ce putain d'hôtel, je l'aurais dit sur le trottoir. Plus jamais tu me parles de responsabilité dans cette affaire.
One evening, while having dinner at a restaurant, Leo tells Frank that she is pregnant. Overjoyed at the prospect of their baby's arrival, they decide to move into a larger apartment. While packing, Frank comes across his old badge, still stained with the blood of one of the Trenton Hotel shooters. His curiosity drives him to uncover the true identity of the assailant. He then seeks help from a friend who works as a forensic police doctor to analyze the DNA from the bloodstain. Sometime later, Frank meets with Ben and tells him that one of the shooters was a former Special Forces member named Salim. Since Salim was known to work at the Directorate of Security and often collaborated with various government ministries, Frank begins to suspect that the foreign guest found dead at the hotel was no ordinary person. Yet again, Ben warns him not to get further involved. Frank ultimately heeds his advice, storing all information about Salim inside a locker and hiding the locker key on his apartment rooftop. This finally reveals that the key Frank had been hiding all along was the one to the locker containing those crucial pieces of evidence. Years later, Frank's desire to expose the conspiracy behind the Trenton Hotel incident grows stronger. He meets with a journalist to discuss the case, on the condition that his identity remains confidential. After reaching an agreement, Frank agrees to hand over the evidence he has collected. Meanwhile, at the ministry office, the head of the Directorate of Security meets with the minister. During their conversation, it is revealed that 7 months earlier, Colonel John Brennan, a former American officer now working for the CIA, came to France with his security team to arrange an arms deal with Australia. On the day of the incident, 2 ministry staff members entered John's hotel room to retrieve some classified documents. But the plan failed when John and his guards unexpectedly returned. The situation forced Salim and his partner to open fire, killing them both.
Messieurs, s'il vous plaît.
Worse still, they later discovered that a former Guy-Gan member named Frank possessed evidence implicating the Directorate of Security in the incident. Based on the DNA analysis of Salim's blood found on Frank's badge, the information was leaked to them through a journalist working at the same media outlet Frank had once contacted. The minister realizes that if this evidence were to reach the CIA, it would cause a serious diplomatic conflict between France and the United States. Therefore, he orders his subordinates to retrieve Frank's evidence and eliminate him to erase all traces. In the present day, after Van Naken successfully kidnaps Leo, Frank regains consciousness and receives a phone call from him. During the call, Van Naken tells him about Leo's condition and demands that Frank hand over the evidence he hid within 4 hours or Leo will be killed. Before hanging up, Van Naken warns him that involving the police would be pointless. Shortly after, Frank is framed as a fugitive. Van Naken uses Frank's fingerprints, taken from a weapon, to accuse him of murdering Van Naken's own men. In panic, Frank cleans himself up and rushes back to his apartment to retrieve the key hidden in the bathroom sink. Upon arrival, he is shocked to find several police officers already inside. As he tries to reach for the key, he is even more stunned to find it missing. Moments later, an officer catches him, forcing Frank to fight and flee.
Il vient de partir sur les toits. Passez par l'autre côté. À toi. Couche-toi. Bouge pas. Au sol.
After escaping the police pursuit, Frank heads straight to Ben's workplace to tell him everything that has happened. Realizing that the locker key is gone and that Frank needs the bloodstained badge again, Ben takes Frank to his home and gives him his own badge. Frank then smears his blood on it, hoping to trick Van Naken's group and use it as leverage to save Leo. Soon after, Frank and Ben head to a secret meeting point deep in the forest to avoid being traced. Before they arrive, Ben secretly attaches a tracking device to Frank's body. When Frank reaches Van Naken's hideout, he is immediately captured and chained by the henchmen. Once face to face with Van Naken, the man takes Frank's phone and brings it to the location where Leo is being held in a remote area. After obtaining the bloodstained badge he had been searching for, Van Naken orders his men to turn on Frank's phone.
Kom, we maken hier een einde aan.
He then instructs them to send a message to all of Frank's contacts, threatening that his wife and child would be killed if Frank failed to cooperate. The message is crafted to make it appear as though Frank had murdered Leo before doing something terrible. However, without Van Naken's knowledge, the police were still searching for Frank receive a GPS signal from his reactivated phone. With his plans set in motion, Van Naken leaves the scene and orders 3 of his men to execute Frank and Leo.
Pas de trace là.
Just as the situation seems hopeless, Ben, wearing a mask, suddenly appears and rescues them. Frank, Leo, and Ben quickly hijack a car and flee the area. Chaos erupts as gunfire echoes through the air during the intense chase. In the midst of the mayhem, a bullet grazes Leo's arm, severely injuring her. As Frank tries to stop the bleeding and calm her down, her water suddenly breaks, signaling that labor is about to begin. Seeing this, Frank urges Ben to drive Leo to the hospital as fast as possible. Moments later, Frank jumps out of the car to slow down Van Naken's men, who are relentlessly chasing them from behind. Amid the fierce gunfight between Frank and Van Naken, the mercenary orders his men to continue pursuing the car carrying Leo and Ben. Frank manages to escape using a Forest Patrol motorcycle he steals, while Van Naken continues to hunt him down. Inside the car, Ben notices that Leo's face has turned pale and that she is beginning to lose consciousness. He desperately tries to keep her awake by talking to her, but her condition rapidly deteriorates. Meanwhile, Van Naken's forces continue their pursuit without rest. The situation becomes even more complicated as Frank is now being hunted by both Van Naken and the police. In a desperate move, Frank steals a paramotor from a farmer and takes off into the sky to flee. From above, he contacts Ben to check on Leo's condition, and from Ben's trembling voice, it is clear that Leo is growing weaker and on the verge of passing out completely. After the call ends, it is revealed that Ben, too, is in a dire state, his body covered in wounds and blood from the relentless attacks of Van Naken's men. Elsewhere, Astro, the former commander of Frank and Ben, receives an emergency order to stop his 2 former subordinates' escape. Without hesitation, Astro gathers his team and heads toward the location. Meanwhile, Ben, still being chased by Van Naken's group, pushes himself to the limit to reach the hospital. From the sky, Frank helps guide him through back roads to arrive faster. However, just as Ben is about to reach the hospital parking area, Van Naken appears, pointing his gun directly at him with the intent to kill. Luckily, Frank arrives in time and engages in a brutal fight against Van Naken. During the struggle, Frank nearly succeeds in killing his enemy, but unexpectedly, Astro arrives with an armed unit and surrounds them. Despite the danger and chaos, Frank recklessly runs toward the car to carry Leo, who is on the verge of death, into the hospital.
Non, monsieur, vous restez là, on s'occupe d'elle.
After receiving treatment from the medical team, Leo's life is finally saved, but Frank is immediately arrested by Astro. He is detained to be held accountable for several charges, including the alleged murder of Van Naken's men. 1 month later, Frank, now imprisoned, is overcome with emotion when Leo visits him with their newborn baby. In a heartfelt moment, Leo reveals that she found the key Frank had hidden during the chaos of the battle with Van Naken's men. She also tells him that a few days before the visit, she handed all the evidence over to the government. Because of this, the authorities eventually clear Frank of all charges, declaring that his actions were in self-defense. He is also found not guilty of the deaths of Van Naken's men. In the final scene, Frank and Leo embrace each other with relief and tears of joy, while Ben, now fully recovered, stands nearby. He smiles warmly, happy to see his friend finally gain justice and peace after all the suffering they endured.